for the 38th Senate District, and a candidate for the 1st Congressional District. My background, I'm a 27-year log hauler. I hauled wood for 27 years, followed my dad into a 3rd-generation business, handled that business myself for 14 years. That is what drove me into work, going into politics. I served on the board of directors of the Michigan Association of Timbermen. Came very clear to me that if we don't engage, my government was working very hard to take me out of business. They didn't like trucks and they don't like logging. So it was very obvious to me that those two combinations were deadly. So I got myself elected to the State House, 108th District. I've served on the Natural Resource Committee. I chaired it one term in the House, but I've served on it all the way through. I've served on transportation all the way through. In the Senate, I chair transportation, I chair natural resources, and I serve on finance, and I serve on family social services. That's kind of been the world that I've dealt with in Lansing. Married to my wife Diane for 33 years. We have 4 children. I've got 2 grandchildren, and hopefully this week a 3rd one on the way. 2 of my kids are married, and the other 2 are engaged to be married this coming summer. So we're going to be pretty busy this summer, but I've been blessed with a great family. They're with me on this, and I guess if I could just touch on something that, Gary, I think you brought it up right out of the gate. And we have a pastor with us tonight, so I want to bring that up. I've been down in Lansing. In the last cycle, there was an issue that came up called the Elliott Larson Act.
Yes.
And we had a guy thinking about sponsoring it, and this thing just about got out of the gate and got going. And a young man by the name of Lee Chatfield stepped in and made a run because of that issue. Now, some people would condemn him because they'll say, well, it's just a one-issue deal, but it was pretty passionate and heartfelt for him. And he challenged the individual that was doing it. Actually suggested to him not to do it. He wouldn't run against him. He'd leave him alone. And he said that he was going to go with it.
That would be Frankie Foster,
Yeah.
who was teaming up with Rebecca Warren.
Well, the issue at hand, I think, and I'm part of we do a Bible study every Wednesday morning in Lansing. Anybody down to Lansing wants to be a part of it? We meet at 7 o'clock at Big B's by the House Office Building. We go across 6th floor. But I'm convinced part of the problem we're faced with, guys, with those issues, is even the church is starting to look to the government to solve the problem. And I'm convinced the problem is us, we the people. And we need the church to rise up and take its rightful place, and they're not. And we had a rally down in Lansing this summer. We invited as many as we could find. We were trying to build our list, but we had about 100 pastors show up this summer down in Lansing. And we said, we had a rally with them. And we kind of, as elected officials, kind of challenged back at them that we need them. We need your help. Because I'm convinced our government does work. Unfortunately, it's not working the way we like it today. And what I mean by that is, if it was working and the system, and we as a people, as a whole, were like it used to be with our grandparents and our parents' generation, nobody'd even think about bringing something like that. It just wouldn't happen because people of faith would rise up and say, not on my watch, it's unacceptable.
Well, since you broached the subject, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Where were you December 2nd?
December 2nd. What was December 2nd?
Well, a group of us, my wife and I, we were not practicing to be hippies from the 60s. You know, I was kind of 13 and 69 hit.
Yeah.
But we were down there on the state capitol steps.
On the front steps. Yep, I was there. Yep, I stopped by. But
Do you realize there was a resolution out of it because Pete knew nothing about it? He claimed to be there, but he was too busy talking to Summerfield. I don't know what goes on, and I really don't care. What I keep having to get is every time I call the office, it's like, well, if the bill comes across my desk, I don't see anything proactive from any of my senators, and I'm going to tell you right now, if I can't get a Republican that's going to stand up for what I believe in, and I don't think this is an unreasonable request, I will vote third party come this November.
I don't disagree with you, but when you talk about the rally, my opinion, if we are 80%, I've heard upward of 80% Christian, this nation, 80%. That lawn should have been, you guys, thank you for what you did, but that lawn should have been standing room only.
Well, it would have been nice if it had not been on a Wednesday. Unfortunately, since Obama's been in office, a lot of people are having a hard time making it on a paycheck.
I would just argue the point that it's more than just a vote, it's more than that. And like I told my pastor, I can't be looking back when we're dealing like with Elliot Larson, and there's nobody back there. And I don't mean, like, you guys thank you for what you did, but when I say nobody, I mean the masses are either staying home, they don't care, or everything else is more important to them. And our government can't work like that, it can't function like that, because they need to participate. The other issue you brought up was the water. Something got mentioned about water. Well, the United States, the EPA, has been working on what they call the waters of the U.S. That is about as dangerous of a path as we can go. You've got the EPA going right around Congress, and they're going to legislate how we use our water, when initially they only had governing authority over navigable waters. That's what they had. Now they want the whole enchilada, which includes a little pond in your backyard. How do you control us as far as development, a way of life, our own personal property? You take your rights away from you that way. You take control over the water, you take control over the wetlands, you take control over the land. EPA's been doing this stuff on steroids. We have a lawsuit that was initiated by myself and a couple others up in the Upper Peninsula. We got Marquette County Road Commission to we needed somebody to take the face of it. We've been trying to raise money behind the scenes to keep it going. The lawsuit's been dropped in Grand Rapids in federal court. I challenge you to go look at the complaint, because the attorneys, Clark Hill was the law firm we retained, they've been FOIA-ing for almost a year. That's why it took us so long to get there. They needed the information. So far, what we found, the EPA has been coordinating with Senator Barbara Boxer in California on a haul road in Michigan. They assured her, and here's what's important, the timeline of the email exchange. The EPA office assured Senator Boxer's office in California the haul road in Marquette County will not be built. Here's the irony of all that. The email exchange and the dates on it were right before Marquette County Road Commission actually applied for the permit. So they knew it was coming, because Marquette had been building up, putting their information together. You got our government telling Senator Boxer the road's not going to get built. They hadn't even got out to first base, but yet they never said anything like that to us. We went through town hall meetings. We had places packed up there with people that showed up to say, build the road. And they went through this Mickey Mouse event. They had already formed their opinion and already made up their mind before it was ever done. That's where we got overreach with the federal government taking over. And we've got, you know what else we got going is coordination between said federal government agency with our own DEQ federal state agencies, because the FOIA showed that too.
Okay, so I guess you're the one that can answer the question. So is the DEQ and the DNR of Michigan writing regulations and rules?
Yes.
As other laws?
Yes. Oh my goodness, yes.
So, and my question is supposedly understanding the Constitution not only of the United States, but of Michigan. Is that not the job of our lawmakers that are supposed to be doing this?
Yes, and I can change it. I have the ability, and I've tried, and I've done some changes, but here's the deal. The way the government operates, the departments, is the director, they'll do a town hall meeting, they'll have a few meetings over it, discuss it. I'll give you an example. Anybody familiar with the Pigeon River in here?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
The Pigeon River, the whole Pigeon River, the contiguous Pigeon River, over by Gaylor, just north of Gaylor.
Oh, the one that goes up to about Sheboygan? Or
Yeah,
just
pretty
about,
close, yeah.
Okay.
120,000 acres.
Yeah, we canoed it.
The director of the DNR, as an example, it's just one example of many, but the director, they held public hearings with the NRC, the Natural Resource Commission, about what they needed to do in the Pigeon River pertaining to people being able to ride the horses out the Pigeon River, who, by the way, have been doing that for over 30 years. So the order ended up saying, we got an audit from the federal government, this would be the Fish and Wildlife, said you must do, and then they told us what it was. The DNR said we must do X, Y, and Z. Public hearings, there was waves of people coming. Don't do this to us. Work with us. Sit down, let's talk. Legislators saying, hold the fort. Don't do this. This isn't right. Becky Humphreys signed the order 6 o'clock Thursday night. Signed the order to implement the removal of these trails and these people that wanted to ride the horses up in the Pigeon River, you're only gonna be in limited areas, you can ride on the gravel roads with the horses. Well, you know what that's like doing that with cars? So that was the order, because there's too many of you up there, you're destroying the environment, you're causing erosion, I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff. She signed the order. Now remember, they had multiple meetings about this. They kept taking all this information in, like we want to know what everybody's thinking before we actually do this, because what if the people don't want it, right? We're supposed to have the say, right? 6 o'clock, she signed the order. 8 o'clock the next morning, there was people up in the Pigeon, and they went and took pictures. You know how the picture has the date on the bottom of it? They took pictures, because at 8 o'clock in the morning, the DNR was already drilling holes in the ground and putting factory-bought signs up with the horse rider with the circle and the line through it, and blocking off all the trails. Like, I would ask all of you, how did they do that? If she signed the order 6 o'clock on Thursday night, how did they know to go buy all the signs and the posts and have it all put together and ready to go for 8 o'clock the next morning if they had not already made up their minds, this is what we're going to do through the stroke of a pen? So how do I change it? I got to craft a bill, which is fine, I'm not complaining, but I got to draft a bill, I got to go to a committee, I got to convince half the committee, better than half the committee I'm right, get it passed, go to the Senate floor, convince half the Senate I'm right, then I got to go over to the House and go through the same process again, convince the House I'm right, over half, and then get a governor to sign the bill. The director did it simply through the stroke of a pen. The process I have to go through can be tough, which is good, so I can't be king for the day. So it's a good process. They're usurping that process through those orders. So we spend most of our time fighting the orders.
Well, here's another thought process. Why don't you just cut the funding, and then they won't be able to.
They're getting their money from the federal government. Hey, look,
I'm sorry.
this is even easier than that. Take a chainsaw and chop those freaking posts down, because they have no authority to do that. Period. They cannot make laws. It's not a law. It's nullified. Period. You go chop the freaking post down, and you tell those people to go pack sand, because they don't belong in the state. First of all, they have no authority in the state of Michigan. God help them. And with the same crap they're pulling out there in Oregon right now, trying to get those ranchers off the land by burning them out and saying, oh, you know, you got the turtle, or you got this other thing, or, you know, the natural birds up there. It's all designed to get the ranchers off the land so they can get in there and get the minerals out. It's as simple as that. And all the EPA and all these alphabet soup organizations that are part of the government, they're not here to protect us anymore, folks. They're not here to protect us. They've been infiltrated by people who want to subdue us and take our lands and take our freedom, take our property, and push us into the cities so they can have access to all of our stuff. It's as simple as that. They've been very sneaky about it. They say, oh, the environment, oh, you know, we got to watch out for our fuel, oh, we got this other problem. But it's like, don't you think, you know, your children should be raised by some other people instead of yourselves? Things just crazy, things that we never would have accepted just 10 years ago. And they're getting away with it. And we have to just say no.
But you know what he's saying was actually in a report back in 1958 by a former FBI agent. And he listed the things that the government was proposing to do. And I was shocked when I read this report back in 1958, going through the EPA,
If you look at
going through our school system, making
every part of our
same-sex
society is
marriages.
being undermined by it. If you look at the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto, they pinged every single one of them, straight down the line, federal, state, local. You know, if you look at, you hear about people wanting to put bike paths in. That's communism. You know, who needs a bike path up here? There's hardly any cars, let alone, you know, places you can ride your bike right down the middle of the road. And most of the time, the deer won't even hit you, most of the time. But it's just crazy what they're doing, and we sit by and we go, oh, they must be right because they're the experts. They're not.
The thing that I don't understand is how they can actually pull it off.
We let them.
The people who enforce these orders, don't they have brains?
Yeah, well, they get a job, and they got to protect that job.
Well, yeah.
But you have to ask yourself, again, because you just mentioned all the way back to the 50s, but what's changed and why aren't people reacting? I agree with you. Why is not the public reacting? And that's what I've been driving at with, I don't care who you folks support who you vote for, you can vote all day long till you're blue in the face. If you're gonna send myself or somebody down there or out there to fix it, and then go home and suggest, and you're not, I can't, I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, because you're all here. You're spending an hour of your time here to hear what's going on, get informed, and maybe be active. But the place should be packed. That's my point. And so when it's not, then the government starts reflecting that inaction or that passive, well, whatever, and it makes it very difficult. I've got an individual up in Manistee. He's got a camp in the Hiawatha Forest. Forest Service came in and suggested his property line was over on theirs, and they were really trying to take his property. Dr. Veneshek was involved, and thank goodness, because had he not gotten involved, they would have taken his property. And it's still not resolved, but here's the issue. This elderly gentleman had one of his buddies out for hunting season when they, in my opinion, really came on him way too strong. They brought out conservation officers, you name it, like he was somehow a criminal. They sent one of the guys to the hospital with a massive heart attack. So this goes to court. Dr. Veneshek's office went and helped him at the court. Our office tried to engage. Nobody went from his family. Nobody from Manistee. It was on the radios, people were talking about it. Nobody in our society was going in with this individual because his property rights are getting taken from him. And so he goes into court, spends his money to fight the government on his own, literally. And I don't say it to blame, I'm just saying it to say, I'm looking at myself when I say it, but he shouldn't be going to court alone. The room should be packed with his neighbors, his family, and Manistee. And the community should come out and jam that courtroom and say, the way the government is treating this man is inappropriate, we're not standing for it. Now you'll get some action, I think, better than what we're doing by us. We're there, so they're paying attention, but they're dragging it through the system.
And a side note on that was a decades-old hunting camp. That wasn't something they just built like 2 or 3 years ago. That thing had been there for...
Right, 3 generations. Yeah, it's a shame what they did to him. But anyway, I don't want to take all the night here away from you, but thanks for letting me share with you. But I am convinced our government system can work. Of, for, and by the people, but we the people have to engage. And it can't be just a handful. And when I say handful, when we're talking about how many hundreds of millions of people there are in this country, and only a handful percentage-wise are the only ones speaking out, saying something, other than when you're at the coffee shop with your buddy and complaining and having coffee, it doesn't work. We need help. Whoever's running for office, we need help.
Well, I will tell you for a fact, sir, this year, prior years, I have called Jim, I have called Pete, I called John when John was down there. I have gone to the ritual and the runaround. Matter of fact, I called, you might know Senator Rick Green.
Mike Green.
To Jones or whoever's on the Judiciary Committee in Lansing.
Oh, Rick Jones, yeah. Yep.
Talked to him about the RFRA bill that was supposed to go through the House and Senate. And I talked to one of his aides, because you don't get to talk to these guys directly. He said, well, you know, that bill's kind of controversial. It's like, are you kidding me? You know, the thing is after a while you get tired. I mean, I've written Dan so many times, John so many times, Jim so many times, Pete so many times. I'm getting tired of writing letters.
And they send back form letters, like, oh, thank you
Yeah,
very much.
pretty
I
much.
really value
Even
your opinion. And
Dan Banachek has been just as useless sometimes.
We need to step up the petitions. How well do you think petitions work for getting, because we have a lot of people who are more than willing to sign a petition, and we submit thousands of signatures saying, hey, we do not like what you're doing to this man.
Right.
Does that...
It helps, but I would caution all of us here, be careful. Because to your credit, you're calling and you're trying. Hats off to you. But you know something? There could be 50 other people with the opposite viewpoint you have also calling, doing exactly what you're doing and saying, I don't want you to do this. Okay, so now as an elected official, what do?
Yeah.
What do? Because it's...
Do you want a real honest answer?
Yes.
What is the purpose of government? Real simple question, simple answer. Give it to me.
Represent the people.
No. It's to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. And our law comes from common law, which is based
Yeah.
on biblical law.
Especially when you're
So
talking
when you're
federal.
starting to talk about theft, you're talking about misrepresenting people, you're talking about murder, you're talking about stealing people, coveting people's property.
Yep.
All that stuff is covered, and that's what government's supposed to take care of. Instead, we take care of social problems, where out of every dollar, 30% gets to the person that needs help. I mean, that's a terrific job when you look
But
at it.
my point was, and that's what I'm driving at, because again, thank you for coming out, but as hard as you're working at it and you're active and you're going after it, sometimes I think people feel like everybody's thinking like you, and so your elected officials just not listening to you, they're not taking the time, but I would just argue, are you sure? And are you sure that 50 other people aren't? I've had that happen, because we document the calls as they come in when we have big issues, and I've had it stacked, the deck stacked this way, individual letters, emails, and calls. Strongly this way, and over on this side, the group that really felt like they were active, when they asked me, well, how it laid out, why did you do it this way? I said, well, here it is, and I showed them the calls. I blotted out the names, but I showed them the number, and they almost fell over because they were passionate, and they were engaged, and they felt like my elected official needs to listen to me because I called. And I don't want to be disrespectful, like I'm not going to listen to you, but what I'm really arguing at is I think, what I'm hearing here tonight, I think we're on the right side of history. I
We're not
fear,
acting on it.
I fear the public is drifting away from us. And we're arguing amongst ourselves rather than trying to convince our neighbors and our friends, this is why we need to do this. And so then if we don't talk to them, well then go to the elected official, he'll change it or she'll change it, just make them do the right thing. And it's getting harder and harder because the public is drifting.
Well, no,
That's
what it is
exactly
a
right. That's exactly right. In an organization like Wall Builders, they're talking to the people, and they say, we have the government we have because this is what we did. And it's waking up the people. And, if you were somebody that was in my district or something like that, and if you sent out, we live in the woods, we don't have email, but if you sent out an alert, call out the guards, and the people who says, all right, you don't like government, and you call this one, you can almost, to activate. Because I swear, when in Indiana, they must have called all these people to come and pounce on them because the governor wanted to pass a form of religious protection.
Right.
I says, these people must be paid because the average person who's at a job cannot go out there, but who got the media attention? Who got the governor to back down on his law? And where were the people? I mean, even organizations like Walmart and Google and Microsoft, putting in their voice, but then people like us aren't heard in it.
Yeah, and I'll let you go, but I'm just challenging us all. We gotta educate our neighbors and our friends. And the church has to rise up.
That would make a good YouTube video. How to
Thank
get
you.
involved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you.